I couldn't feel my legs. The concrete beneath me was cold against my back, but below my waist, nothing. Just nothing. My brother Jake stood above me, still laughing at his birthday prank, while our parents berated me for ruining his party. He'd promised cushions would break my fall from the second-story deck. He lied. "Walk it off! Stop being a baby!" my father yelled. My mother accused me of being dramatic for attention. Then the paramedic tested my reflexes. Her face went white. She immediately called for police backup. 2 weeks before that moment changed everything, I was hunched over my nursing textbooks at 3 a.m, highlighting drug interactions and memorizing dosage calculations. The exam that would determine my future was just days away, and I'd moved back home temporarily to save money while studying. It was supposed to be a smart financial decision. Looking back, I should have known better. Jake had always been the golden child in our family, despite every piece of evidence suggesting he shouldn't be. At 24, he dropped out of 3 different colleges, accumulated 2 DUIs, and couldn't hold a job for more than a month. But to our parents, Linda and Robert, he was perpetually full of potential, just temporarily down on his luck. They paid for his apartment in the trendy part of town, covered his car payments on a BMW he didn't need, and handled his legal fees like they were utility bills. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs while studying for my boards. I stocked shelves at a pharmacy from 4 to 8 every morning, then worked as a medical assistant at a clinic until 6 in the evening. Even living at home, I insisted on paying rent, $500 a month that my parents accepted without hesitation. Yet somehow, I was still the disappointment. "Your brother just needs more support," my mother would say whenever I questioned why they were paying another one of his bills. "He's finding himself. You've always been the strong one, Vanessa. You don't need us the same way." The irony wasn't lost on me, that their strong daughter was working herself to exhaustion while their vulnerable son spent his days playing video games and his nights partying with friends who were equally directionless. But I'd learned long ago that pointing out these contradictions only led to accusations of jealousy and lectures about family loyalty. 3 days before Jake's birthday party, I'd made the mistake of leaving my laptop unattended for 20 minutes while I showered. When I returned, Jake was sitting at my desk, my computer open in front of him. "Just checking my email," he said, not looking up. Later that evening, when I opened my exam prep files, they were gone. 6 months of carefully organized notes, practice tests, and study guides, deleted. The folder wasn't even in the recycling bin. Jake claimed he didn't know what happened, suggested maybe I'd accidentally deleted them myself. "You should have backed up better," my father said when I pleaded for them to make Jake admit what he'd done. "This is a good lesson for you, about being more careful with important things." My mother nodded in agreement. "Besides, accusing your brother without proof is really hurtful, Vanessa. He's sensitive about people not trusting him." I spent the next 72 hours recreating what I could from memory and borrowed notes from classmates. Amy, my best friend from nursing school, brought me her entire binder and stayed up with me one night, helping me rebuild my study guides. She was the one who asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Why do you let them treat you like this?" I didn't have a good answer then. Family was complicated, I told her. They were still my parents. Jake was still my brother. Things would get better once I graduated and moved out for good. The birthday party was planned for Saturday afternoon. Jake wanted something huge, despite having no job to pay for it. My parents immediately volunteered our backyard and promised to cover everything from catering to decorations to the DJ he insisted on having. When I suggested that maybe serving alcohol wasn't wise given Jake's history with DUIs, my mother's face flushed with anger. "You really can't let him have one special day, can you?" she snapped. "This jealousy is ugly on you, Vanessa." By 2 in the afternoon on Saturday, the party was in full swing. Jake's friends had arrived already drunk, carrying cases of beer and bottles of liquor, despite the fully stocked bar my parents had arranged. Music blasted so loud that Mrs. Patterson next door had already come over once to ask for it to be turned down, only to be dismissed by my father with a condescending promise to try to keep it reasonable. I stayed in my room initially, using the time to study while everyone was distracted. But Jake had other plans. Around 4 o'clock, he burst into my room, without knocking, grabbing my arm with his usual too-tight grip. "Come on, uptight sister," he slurred, alcohol heavy on his breath. "I want to show everyone something hilarious." I tried to pull away, but he was stronger and had the advantage of me not wanting to cause a scene. He dragged me out to the deck where about 30 people were gathered, all watching with the eager expressions of people about to witness something entertaining at someone else's expense. "Watch this," Jake announced, gesturing broadly to the crowd. "My sister thinks she's so perfect, but she's actually the biggest klutz. Remember when you fell off the roof trying to get your frisbee?" He turned to me with that smile I'd learned to fear over the years. "Let's recreate it, but better." Before I could process what was happening, he'd maneuvered me toward the section of deck that didn't have a railing, a spot where my father had been meaning to repair the barrier for months. Below, I could see cushions from our outdoor furniture, arranged on the concrete patio. "Just fall backward," Jake said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The cushions are right there. Unless you're too scared? Come on, don't ruin my birthday by being a baby." The crowd was chanting now, encouraged by Jake's enthusiasm and too much alcohol. My parents stood among them, my mother actually smiling, my father raising his beer in encouragement. "Don't be so dramatic, Vanessa," my mother called out. "It's just a bit of fun." I tried to step away from the edge, but Jake moved behind me. "On 3, he shouted to the crowd. 1, 2. On 3, he shoved me. Hard. Not a playful push, but a violent thrust that sent me flying backward off the deck. In that split second of falling, I saw him kick the cushions away with his foot, sending them scattering across the patio. Then came the impact. When the paramedic arrived, courtesy of Mrs. Patterson, who'd called 911 against my parents' wishes, she immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Sarah, according to her name tag, was young but thorough. She ran through the standard neurological tests, and with each one, her expression grew more concerned. "Can you feel this?" she asked, pressing a pen against my foot. "Nothing. How about this?" She moved to my knee, my thigh. Still, nothing. That's when she reached for her radio and called for police backup, her voice steady but urgent. "We have a potential assault case with severe spinal injury. Need immediate police response." My parents' indignation was instant. "Assault?" my father boomed. This was just an accident. Kids playing around. But Sarah had already seen enough. As she and her partner carefully prepared me for transport, she leaned close and whispered, "The hospital will document everything. Every bruise, every injury. You're safe now." It wasn't until I was in the ambulance, Jake's laughter still echoing from the backyard, that I remembered something crucial. This wasn't the first time I'd left a family gathering in an ambulance. It wasn't even the 5th. The emergency room at Riverside General was bustling when we arrived, but the trauma team was already waiting. Sarah had called ahead with my condition, and the gravity in their faces told me everything I needed to know about my situation. As they transferred me onto the hospital gurney, I caught glimpses of my parents' Mercedes pulling into the parking lot, my father driving with his usual aggressive speed. Within minutes, they'd pushed their way into my trauma bay, my mother's designer heels clicking against the linoleum like a countdown to chaos. Jake stumbled in behind them, still drunk from his party, still wearing his birthday crown that someone had made from beer cans. "She's fine," my father announced to the medical team, as if his declaration could override the obvious paralysis. Vanessa has always been prone to dramatics. Once when she was 12, she pretended to have appendicitis just to get out of a math test. I'd actually had appendicitis. The surgery scar was still visible on my abdomen, but correcting him would require energy I didn't have, and the medical team wasn't listening to him anyway. Dr. Martinez, the resident overseeing my care, was taking notes as the nurses worked. She was perhaps 35, with keen eyes that seemed to catch every detail. When my father stepped too close to my gurney, she smoothly positioned herself between us. "Sir, I need you to step back. We're conducting an examination. That's when I heard my mother in the hallway, her voice carrying despite her attempt at discretion. She was talking to someone from the party, someone named Trevor, who I vaguely remembered as one of Jake's drinking buddies. She jumped, my mother was saying. You saw it, right? She was showing off, trying to prove something. She's always been jealous of the attention Jake gets. You'll tell them that, won't you? That she jumped? Trevor's response was mumbled, but I heard my mother's follow-up clearly. There might even be a little something in it for you, for your trouble. We just want to make sure the truth is told correctly. Jake, meanwhile, had cornered a young nurse who was trying to input information into a computer. You should check if she's been drinking, he said loudly. She probably had a few beers. Lightweight, you know. Can't handle her alcohol. That's probably why she fell. The nurse looked uncomfortable but continued typing. The blood tests will show any substances in her system, sir. Well, make sure you test for everything, Jake insisted. Drugs, too. You never know with her. She's studying so hard, probably taking something to stay awake. I wanted to scream that I'd never touched drugs in my life, that I rarely even took aspirin, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. Dr. Martinez heard me trying to speak and came closer. They're lying, I managed to say. He pushed me, moved the cushions. She nodded, making another note. We have to report this to the police. It's protocol with injuries like this. No police, my father interrupted, having overheard. This is a family matter. Accidents happen at parties. No need to blow this out of proportion. But it was too late. 2 officers were already walking through the emergency room doors, and I recognized one of them. Officer Janet Mills had responded to a call at our house 3 years ago, when Jake had put his fist through a window during an argument. She'd wanted to file a report then, but my parents had convinced her it was unnecessary. She recognized me too. Vanessa? What happened this time? Before I could answer, my mother swooped in. Officer Mills, how lovely to see you again, though unfortunate under these circumstances. Our daughter had a little accident at a family gathering. She's always been somewhat clumsy. You might remember from last time. Officer Mills pulled out her notebook, her expression neutral but alert. I'll need to speak with Vanessa directly. She's on pain medication, my father said quickly. Not reliable right now. Very confused. I hadn't been given any pain medication yet. The pain was excruciating, but they needed to complete neurological assessments first. Dr. Martinez caught this lie immediately. Actually, we haven't administered any pain medication yet. She's completely lucid. My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication I'd seen hundreds of times before. My mother's next move was predictable. She pulled Dr. Martinez aside, lowering her voice to a confidential whisper that was still audible to those of us paying attention. Doctor, I should mention that Vanessa has a history of mental health issues. Attention-seeking behavior, tendency toward hysteria. Her father and I have been concerned about her state of mind lately, with all the stress from her studies. Sometimes she does things to get attention, especially when Jake is the center of focus. Dr. Martinez's expression didn't change, but I saw her make another note. We'll need to see her medical records to verify any history of mental health treatment. Of course, my mother said smoothly. Though a lot of it was handled privately. We didn't want records following her, you understand. Protective parents and all. Meanwhile, Jake had pulled out his phone and was typing furiously. Within minutes, I heard the ping of notifications from the nurses' stations. He'd posted on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of it. I couldn't see the posts, but I heard him reading them aloud to Trevor, who'd been brought in for questioning. Had to watch my sister hurt herself for attention at my birthday party. Now spending the night at the hospital instead of celebrating. Traumatized. Might need therapy after seeing her do this to herself. Starting a GoFundMe for my therapy bills if anyone wants to help. Dude, that's cold, Trevor said, but he was laughing. It's smart, Jake corrected. Control the narrative before she can lie about what happened. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks, not from pain but from the sheer cruelty of it all. That's when Amy arrived, breathless from running. She'd been at work when Mrs. Patterson called her, knowing she was my emergency contact. Amy took one look at the scene, my parents huddled with Jake, the police trying to get straight answers, me immobilized on the gurney, and pulled out her phone. She started taking screenshots of everything Jake had posted, then moved systematically through the social media accounts of everyone who'd been at the party, capturing their posts and stories before they could be deleted. "What are you doing?" my mother demanded. "Preserving evidence," Amy replied coldly. "Something you seem very interested in destroying." The tension in the room escalated when Dr. Martinez returned with a neurologist. "We need to do an MRI immediately. The paralysis isn't improving, and we need to see the extent of the damage. There's a possibility of permanent injury without immediate intervention." "How immediate?" my father asked. "Within the next few hours. We need surgical intervention if there's compression on the spinal cord." My parents exchanged another look. "We need to think about this," my mother said. "Surgery is risky. Maybe we should try physical therapy first, see if she improves." Dr. Martinez's professionalism cracked slightly. "Physical therapy won't help if her spinal cord is being compressed. She could lose function permanently if we wait." "Still," my father said, "as her next of kin, we have the right to make medical decisions if she's incapacitated." "I'm not incapacitated," I said as loudly as I could manage. "I'm paralyzed, not unconscious." "You're clearly not thinking straight," my mother said, patting my hand in a gesture that looked caring but felt like a threat. "The shock and all. We'll handle this, sweetheart." Dr. Martinez looked between me and my parents, her expression growing more concerned. "I'm going to need to consult with the ethics board about this." As she left, I heard my father on the phone with someone, his voice low but urgent. "We need to transfer her to St. Mary's. You're still on the board there, right? We need this handled quietly. Family situation. You understand." St. Mary's was 45 minutes away, where my parents' golf buddy ran the emergency department. If they moved me there, any evidence of what really happened would likely disappear. Amy must have heard too, because she immediately called someone on her phone, speaking rapidly. "I need you to file an emergency injunction preventing them from moving her. Yes, right now. She's in danger." The next few hours were a blur of arguments, legal calls, and medical assessments. My parents tried every tactic from threatening to sue the hospital to attempting to sweet-talk the staff. Jake disappeared at some point, probably to delete evidence or coach more witnesses. Finally, a judge's order came through. I was to remain at Riverside General for treatment, and my parents' medical decision-making power was temporarily suspended pending investigation. The look of rage that crossed my father's face when he heard this made me grateful for the police presence. As they wheeled me toward the MRI suite, Dr. Martinez walked beside the gurney. "We're going to take complete scans," she said. "Not just of the current injury, everything." I didn't understand then why she emphasized everything. But I would soon. Detective Sandra Williams wasn't what I expected. She arrived at the hospital the morning after my MRI, carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression that suggested she'd seen too much but still cared enough to keep fighting. Her gray hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her handshake with Amy, who'd stayed with me all night, was firm and reassuring. "I've been reviewing your medical history," she said without preamble, settling into the chair beside my bed. "You've had quite a few accidents over the years." The way she said accidents made it clear she didn't believe they were accidental at all. She opened her folder, spreading papers across the rolling table they used for meals. Each one was a medical report from the past decade. "Broken arm, age 16, fell from treehouse," she read. "Concussion, age 18, hit head on cabinet. Severe burns on left hand, age 19, cooking accident. Fractured ribs, age 21, fell downstairs. Another concussion, age 23, walked into a door. Hypothermia, age 24, locked outside in winter. And now, at 26, paralysis from a fall." She looked up at me. "That's 7 emergency room visits in 10 years, all while living with or near your brother Jake." I'd never seen them all laid out like that. Each incident had seemed isolated, explained away by my clumsiness or bad luck. But together, they formed a pattern that made my stomach churn. "Tell me about the broken arm," Detective Williams said. I closed my eyes, remembering. Jake needed money for a car down payment. My parents said they couldn't afford it. 2 days later, I fell from the treehouse. Jake said he was trying to teach me to climb better. The rung broke under my weight. "But you weighed what, 110 pounds at 16? 105, I corrected. She made a note. And the treehouse held Jake, who weighed what? Probably 170 at the time. Interesting. And your parents? They sued the previous homeowner who'd built the treehouse. Said it was negligent construction. Got $30,000 in the settlement. Jake got his car." Amy gasped. She hadn't known about the lawsuit. Detective Williams moved to the next incident. The concussion at 18? I was reaching for something in the kitchen cabinet. Jake said he didn't see me and opened it right into my head. Needed 12 stitches. My parents' homeowner's insurance paid out $15,000 for medical costs and suffering. Jake's DUI lawyer was paid the next week. We went through each incident, and with every story the pattern became clearer. Jake needed money. I got hurt. Insurance paid out. Jake's problem was solved. It was so obvious when laid out like this that I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. "But here's what really interests me," Detective Williams said, pulling out a new set of papers. "Your friend Amy brought me something fascinating. Financial records she helped you organize when you were applying for student loans." Amy shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't snooping. "Vanessa asked me to help her understand why her credit was so bad, despite never having credit cards." "And what did you find?" the detective prompted. "Life insurance policies," Amy said. "Multiple ones, taken out on Vanessa by her parents. She's not the beneficiary on any of them." I tried to sit up but couldn't, the paralysis a constant reminder of my current state. "What do you mean, life insurance policies?" Detective Williams laid them out. "Your parents have taken out 7 different life insurance policies on you over the past 15 years. Total value if you were to die, $2 million. If you were to become permanently disabled, $800,000. Your brother Jake is listed as secondary beneficiary on all of them." The room spun, and not from any medication. My parents had literally been betting on my death or disability. "There's more," Detective Williams continued. "I interviewed your neighbors this morning. Mrs. Patterson has been keeping a journal for years. She's documented numerous incidents she witnessed. She pulled out photocopies of handwritten pages, dated and detailed. Mrs. Patterson's careful script described things I'd forgotten or never knew she'd seen. Jake pushing me off the roof while teaching me to skateboard when I was 14. The time he'd locked me in the freezer during hide and seek when I was 10. My parents taking 45 minutes to find me. The day she'd seen Jake hold me underwater at our pool until I stopped moving. My parents laughing it off as kids playing when she'd run over in panic. She tried to call CPS multiple times when you were younger, Detective Williams said gently. Your parents always had explanations. You were clumsy. Jake was just playing too rough. They'd be more careful. The case was always closed. I thought about Mrs. Patterson, who'd baked me cookies after every accident, who'd taught me to garden as an excuse to keep me at her house longer, who'd called 911 yesterday despite my parents telling her not to. She'd been trying to protect me all along. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, Detective Williams said, her tone sharpening. I got a warrant for Jake's internet history. 2 weeks before your fall, he was researching spinal injuries. Specifically, he was looking up how to cause paralysis without death, what height would cause specific injuries, and how much insurance companies pay out for different levels of spinal damage. Amy grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. I couldn't squeeze back. But the real smoking gun, the detective continued, is this. She pulled out a printed screenshot from a group chat. Jake's friend Mike sent this to me this morning. He was in a group chat where Jake was discussing the party. The message was from a week before the party. Got it all planned. Cushions will be there so everyone sees them, but they're easy to move. Parents already increased the insurance policy. One good push, and we're set. Someone had responded with a laughing emoji and, "Dude, that's dark." Jake's response, "It's genius. She won't die from 2 stories if she lands right. Just some nice, expensive spinal damage. My parents already talked to their lawyer about injury settlements. Could be looking at $500,000 easy." I vomited then, barely managing to turn my head in time. A nurse rushed in to help, and Detective Williams waited patiently while I was cleaned up. "I need to ask you something difficult," she said when I was settled again. "Think back to when you were 12. You were hit by a car?" The memory was fuzzy, but there. Jake and I were walking to school. He was supposed to hold my hand at the crosswalk. I remember him letting go and pushing me forward. The car tried to stop, but couldn't in time. Your parents sued the driver for $200,000, said it was emotional trauma for the whole family. The driver lost his house paying the settlement. I found out later he'd attempted suicide because of the guilt. Detective Williams' jaw tightened. That driver was my brother. He never recovered from thinking he'd almost killed a child, but there was a traffic camera that nobody knew about then. I pulled the footage yesterday. It clearly shows Jake pushing you into traffic. The room was silent except for the beeping of machines monitoring my condition. Everything I thought I knew about my life was unraveling. Your parents have made approximately $800,000 from your injuries over the years, Detective Williams summarized. That's not counting the money they saved by using your injuries as tax write-offs, medical expense deductions, and other financial manipulations. Jake has received cars, bail money, legal fees, apartment deposits, all timed within weeks of your accidents. So they've been doing this my whole life? My voice was hollow. It appears so, and it was escalating. The injuries were getting worse, the payouts bigger. This time, she gestured to my paralyzed legs. This time, they might have gone too far. Amy spoke up then. "What about Brittany? Jake's girlfriend?" "She was at the party." Detective Williams smiled slightly. "Already spoke to her. She's disgusted by what she saw. In fact, she's coming in this afternoon. Says she has something we need to hear." As if summoned, there was a knock at the door. A young woman with blonde hair and tired eyes entered hesitantly. I recognized her as Jake's latest girlfriend, someone he'd been dating for about 6 months. "Brittany?" Detective Williams stood. "Thank you for coming." Brittany looked at me in the bed, and her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry. I should have said something sooner. I didn't know it was this bad." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "I recorded something last week. Jake doesn't know. He was drunk and talking with your parents about the party. I thought it was just drunk rambling, but after yesterday..." She hit play on her phone and Jake's voice filled the room, slurred but clear. "One good push, that's all. She's small. She'll fall perfect. Mom already talked to that doctor at St. Mary's about spinal injuries. Says they're worth the most if they're not complete paralysis. Just enough to need lifetime care. We could milk this for years." Then my mother's voice, calm and calculating. "Just make sure there are witnesses who see the cushions first. We need it to look like an accident that went wrong, not intentional. And for God's sake, stay sober enough to stick to the story." My father's voice came next. "The insurance adjuster already suspects something from the last claim. This needs to be perfect. No mistakes." "Don't worry," Jake laughed on the recording. "Vanessa's so used to getting hurt she probably won't even question it. Girl's been programmed since birth to think she's clumsy." The MRI results arrived while Detective Williams was still processing Brittany's recording. Dr. Martinez entered with the radiologist, Dr. Kumar, whose expression was grim. Behind them came a neurologist I hadn't met before, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, who was carrying what looked like every scan I'd ever had in my life. "We need to discuss your results," Dr. Martinez said, glancing at Detective Williams. "Should we do this privately?" "No," I said firmly. "The detective needs to hear this. Amy, too." Dr. Kumar pulled up the images on a tablet, positioning it so everyone could see. "The current injury is severe. You have compression at L2 and L3, with significant swelling around the spinal cord. We need surgery within the next few hours, or the paralysis could become permanent. But that's not the most concerning finding, Dr. Chen interrupted, pulling up additional images. When we did the complete scan, we found evidence of repeated traumatic brain injuries dating back at least 15 years. You have scarring, consistent with at least 4 major concussions, possibly more. She pointed to areas on the brain scan that even I, with my limited medical training, could see were abnormal. These injuries show a pattern. They're all in similar areas, suggesting impacts from the same angle, the same force. This isn't random. Someone knew exactly where and how hard to hit to cause maximum damage without immediate death. Are you saying someone's been deliberately causing brain damage? Amy asked, horrified. That's exactly what I'm saying, Dr. Chen confirmed. The pattern is too consistent to be accidental. It's almost textbook, like someone studied how to cause specific injuries. Detective Williams was taking rapid notes. Jake was researching this? We found his search history, Dr. Kumar said, pulling out printed pages. He'd been looking up traumatic brain injuries for years, how to cause them, what the long-term effects were, how much they were worth in insurance claims. He had medical textbooks bookmarked about neural damage. But it gets worse, Dr. Martinez said. She pulled up another set of images. These are from various scans over the years, collected from different hospitals. Look at the progression. The images showed my brain at different ages. Even to my untrained eye, I could see the accumulation of damage. Small dark spots that grew larger, areas that looked different from the healthy tissue around them. You've been having symptoms, haven't you? Dr. Chen asked gently. Headaches, memory problems, difficulty concentrating sometimes? I nodded slowly. My parents said it was stress from studying too hard. They gave me pills for it. What pills? Dr. Chen asked sharply. I don't know. They said they were vitamins and supplements, natural things to help with focus. Detective Williams immediately got on her phone. I need a warrant for the residence. We need to test any medications. Dr. Chen continued her explanation. Based on these patterns, I believe you've been subjected to systematic abuse designed to cause specific types of injuries. The fact that you're functioning as well as you are is remarkable. Your brain has been compensating, creating new pathways around the damaged areas, but there are limits. How bad is it? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. With proper treatment and therapy, you can maintain most of your cognitive function, but you're at increased risk for early onset dementia, seizures, and other neurological problems. These injuries have stolen years from your life expectancy. The weight of this revelation sat heavy in the room. My family hadn't just been hurting me for money. They'd been slowly killing me, one calculated injury at a time. There's something else, Dr. Kumar said reluctantly. The pattern of your current spinal injury, combined with Jake's research history, suggests he knew exactly where to push you and how you'd land. He studied angles, force, and impact. This wasn't a prank gone wrong. This was attempted murder that he wanted to look like an accident resulting in paralysis. Brittany spoke up then, her voice shaky. There's more on my phone. Other recordings. Jake practicing his story, talking about how he'd move the cushions. He had it all planned out. She played another recording. Jake's voice, clearer this time, probably from earlier in the week. The beauty is, even if she dies, we win $2 million in life insurance. But if she's just paralyzed, we can milk disability payments and lawsuits for decades. Either way, problem solved. What problem? His friend asked on the recording. Vanessa. She's about to graduate, become a nurse, move away. Once she's gone, no more easy money. My parents are freaking out about losing their cash cow. This solves everything. Detective Williams stood abruptly. I need to make some calls. We're upgrading the charges from assault to attempted murder, and your parents are being charged as co-conspirators. As she left to coordinate arrests, Dr. Martinez focused on the immediate medical needs. We need to get you into surgery now. The swelling is getting worse. Will I walk again? I asked. With immediate intervention, there's a chance. The nerves aren't completely severed, just compressed. But we need to move now. As they prepared me for surgery, Amy leaned close. I called your nursing school. They're holding your spot, and they're covering any medical expenses not covered by insurance. The dean said to tell you the entire program is rooting for you. Dr. Chen had one more thing to share before I went into surgery. Your brain scans show something else. Despite all the damage, you've maintained exceptional cognitive function. Your recent test scores, your academic performance, it's all remarkable given what you've been through. You're not just a survivor, Vanessa. You're extraordinary. As the anesthesia began to take effect, my last coherent thought was a memory from when I was 8. Jake had held me underwater at the community pool. I remembered the burning in my lungs, the panic, the moment I thought I was going to die. But mostly, I remembered my parents sitting on their pool chairs, watching it happen, timing it on my father's watch. They'd pulled Jake off just before I completely lost consciousness, laughing about how he was such a rough player. They'd been timing how long it took for me to almost die. The surgery lasted 9 hours. Dr. Martinez later told me it was one of the most complex procedures she'd assisted with. The compression was worse than the initial scans showed, and there was additional damage from the years of previous injuries that had weakened the surrounding tissue. But I survived. More than that, when I woke up 12 hours later, I could feel tingling in my toes. It was faint, like pins and needles, but it was there. Sensation. Hope. Amy was there when I opened my eyes, along with Detective Williams and someone new, a prosecutor named James Mitchell who specialized in cases involving long-term abuse patterns. We've arrested them, Detective Williams said without preamble. All 3, your parents and Jake. They're being held without bail given the severity of the charges and the clear evidence of premeditation. The house search turned up even more evidence, Prosecutor Mitchell added. Jake had a notebook, years of documentation about ways to hurt you, rating systems for different injuries based on payout versus risk of detection. Your parents had annotated it with their own notes. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Amy gave me ice chips, and after a moment I managed to ask, the pills they were giving me? Sent to the lab, Detective Williams confirmed. Preliminary tests suggest they were giving you medication that would make you more susceptible to injuries. Muscle relaxants that would make you unsteady. Things that would affect your reflexes. They were literally drugging you to make you easier to hurt. 3 days after my surgery, while I was doing my first physical therapy session and managing to wiggle my toes on command, chaos erupted in the hospital corridor. I could hear my mother's shrill voice before I saw her, screaming about lawsuits and false imprisonment. They were being brought in for official booking after their initial arrest, and the hospital was on their route to the courthouse. Detective Williams had warned me this might happen, and stationed officers at my door. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of my family in handcuffs. My father's usually perfect hair was disheveled, my mother's makeup smeared from crying, and Jake looked smaller somehow, his perpetual smirk replaced with genuine fear. When Jake saw me through the window, he tried to lunge toward my room, screaming obscenities until the officers restrained him. That's when Brittany arrived with Detective Williams, and what she brought changed everything. I couldn't stand it anymore, Brittany said, sitting beside my bed. After seeing what they did to you, I went through Jake's room at his apartment. I found this. She handed a flash drive to Detective Williams. It's everything. Videos, recordings, pictures. He documented it all. Detective Williams plugged the drive into her laptop, and we watched the first video. It was from 3 years ago. Jake had hidden a camera during a family dinner, recording as my parents discussed their investment strategy with me as the investment. She's worth more injured than dead right now, my father said clearly on video. The insurance policies mature at different rates. We need to maximize returns while minimizing suspicion. The next one needs to be something she could do to herself, my mother added. The falls are getting suspicious. Maybe something with her car? Jake laughed on the recording. I could cut her brake lines, make it look like poor maintenance. Too risky, my father said. But medication errors, those happen all the time, especially to stressed nursing students. The next file was a spreadsheet. Detailed calculations of my worth at different ages with different injuries, projected earnings from lawsuits, insurance claims, disability payments. They'd calculated my value down to the penny, with contingency plans for everything from minor injuries to total paralysis to death. But the worst was a video from when I was 15. It showed Jake practicing pressure points on me while I was unconscious, my parents coaching him on exactly where to press to cause specific types of nerve damage. I was clearly drugged, completely unaware of what was happening. "This is monstrous," Amy whispered, gripping my hand. Brittany wasn't finished. "There's more." Jake was recording conversations with other people too. He was paranoid about getting caught, so he recorded everything to have leverage. She pulled up an audio file dated 6 months ago. It was a conversation between my parents and someone named Harold Morrison. The name was familiar, but I couldn't place it. "The network is expanding," Morrison's voice said. "We've got families in 12 states now, all working the system. Your model with Vanessa is the gold standard. Slow, steady, believable injuries. The key is starting young, establishing the pattern early." "How much are the others making?" my mother asked. "The Thompsons cleared $2 million last year with their daughter. The Hendersons are at $800,000 with their son. But nobody has your long-term success rate." Detective Williams immediately got on her phone, calling the FBI. What we'd uncovered wasn't just my family's crime. It was the entire network of families systematically abusing their children for profit. The prosecutor, Mitchell, was taking notes rapidly. "This changes everything. This goes from attempted murder to organized crime, RICO charges, federal involvement." The next recording was from just a week before my fall. Jake was talking to someone on the phone, and from his side of the conversation it was clear he was getting instructions. "Yeah, I understand. Partial paralysis is worth more than complete. She needs to have some sensation for the ongoing medical costs." "Right. The thoracic vertebrae would be too high, could affect breathing. Lumbar region is the sweet spot." "Yes, I've practiced the angle. The cushions will make everyone think it was supposed to be safe." I realized then that Jake hadn't come up with this plan alone. He was being coached by someone with medical knowledge. "Who was he talking to?" I asked. Brittany looked uncomfortable. "Your mother's brother. Your Uncle Pete." Uncle Pete was an orthopedic surgeon in Connecticut. He'd always been friendly at family gatherings, always asked about my health with what I thought was concern. Now I understood he'd been gathering data. Detective Williams called for additional units. "We need to arrest Peter Garrison immediately. Medical license needs to be suspended pending investigation." As we processed this information, there was commotion in the hallway. Jake had broken free from the officers momentarily and was running toward my room. He burst through the door before security could stop him, his face contorted with rage. "You ruined everything," he screamed at me. 20 years of work, gone because you couldn't just fall right. You were supposed to land differently. Now they're all going to prison because you messed up the plan." The officers tackled him, but not before everyone in the room heard his confession. He was still screaming as they dragged him away. "She owes us. We made her who she is. Every scholarship, every opportunity, it was all because people felt sorry for her. She owes us everything." My mother's voice echoed from the hallway as she was pulled past. "Ungrateful brat. We gave you everything. The least you could do was help your family." After they were gone, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Prosecutor Mitchell spoke. "With that outburst, we don't even need a trial. That was a full confession in front of 8 witnesses." Detective Williams was coordinating with other departments. "We've got teams heading to arrest the other families in the network. The FBI is taking over the interstate aspects. This is going to be huge." Dr. Chen entered then with updates on my condition. "The sensation in your legs is improving faster than expected. With intensive physical therapy, I believe you'll walk again. Maybe not perfectly at first, but you'll walk." That evening, As the news broke about the arrest and the larger network, my room became a hub of activity. Nurses and doctors who'd treated me over the years came by, many in tears, apologizing for not seeing the pattern sooner. Mrs. Patterson visited, bringing her journal. "I documented everything I could," she said, her weathered hands shaking slightly. "I knew something was wrong, but your parents were so convincing. They'd say you were accident-prone, that they were doing their best. I should have pushed harder." "You called 911, I reminded her. "You saved my life." She pulled out a box from her bag. "I've been saving these for you." Inside were pictures she'd taken of me over the years, candid shots from her garden, from neighborhood barbecues. In every photo where my family was present, you could see it if you looked closely. The way I stood slightly apart, the way I flinched when Jake moved, the hollow look in my eyes that I'd thought was just how I looked. "You were such a bright little girl," she said softly, "before they broke you. But look at you now. You survived them. You're going to thrive despite them." That night, unable to sleep, I asked Amy to help me go through my things. In my wallet, behind old receipts, I found a folded piece of paper I'd forgotten about. It was a note I'd written to myself at 16, after the broken arm incident. "Remember, you are not clumsy. You are not dramatic. You are not crazy. Someday, someone will believe you. Hold on, until then." I'd forgotten writing it, probably due to one of the concussions. But somewhere, deep in my damaged brain, I'd known the truth all along. The trial began 6 months later, after I'd relearned to walk. Each step was still painful, requiring intense concentration, but I could do it. I walked into that courtroom on my own 2 feet, using a cane for support but standing tall. The physical therapy had been grueling, with Amy by my side for every session, but this moment, facing my abusers as a survivor rather than a victim, made every painful moment worth it. The courtroom was packed. Media coverage had been intense since the story broke about the nationwide insurance fraud ring targeting family members. My case had become the centerpiece of the federal investigation, the one that unraveled the entire network. Prosecutor Mitchell had warned me that my family would try to paint themselves as victims, that their lawyers would attempt every dirty trick to discredit me. What I didn't expect was who their lawyer would be. Harold Morrison walked in like he owned the place, his $1,000 suit and silver hair giving him an air of respectability that made my skin crawl. This was the man whose voice we'd heard on the recordings, the architect of the entire scheme. He'd somehow avoided arrest by claiming attorney-client privilege and lack of direct involvement in the violence. "He's representing them?" Amy whispered, incredulous. "He has too much to lose if they talk," Detective Williams explained from her seat behind us. "He needs to control the narrative." Morrison's opening statement was a masterclass in manipulation. He painted my parents as devoted caregivers, overwhelmed by a daughter with severe mental health issues and attention-seeking behavior. Jake was portrayed as a concerned brother, trying to include his troubled sister in family activities. The fall was a tragic accident, nothing more. But Prosecutor Mitchell was ready. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "you're going to see videos, hear recordings, and review medical evidence that will shock you. This isn't a case about a family struggling with a difficult child. This is about parents who viewed their daughter as an ATM machine, a brother who studied medical textbooks to learn how to hurt without killing, and a lawyer who orchestrated similar schemes across 12 states. The first day of testimony was mine. I sat in that witness box for 6 hours, detailing every accident I could remember. The prosecutor showed the jury photos of each injury, medical records showing the pattern, the escalation. "Tell us about the pool incident when you were 8, Mitchell said gently. I described the feeling of Jake's hands holding me under, the burning in my lungs, my parents watching with detached interest. Several jurors were crying by the time I finished. Morrison's cross-examination was brutal. "Isn't it true you've been jealous of your brother your entire life?" "No." "You resented that he was more loved?" "I resented that he was allowed to hurt me." "You're asking this jury to believe that your parents, who fed you, clothed you, sheltered you, were actually trying to kill you?" Not kill me, I corrected. That would only be worth $2 million. They wanted me damaged enough to be worth a lifetime of payments, but functional enough to keep being injured. Morrison showed pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, smiling photos. Does this look like an abused child? It looks like a child who learned to smile on command, because refusing to play happy family resulted in more injuries. The second day brought Brittany to the stand. She played the recordings she'd made, each one more damning than the last. The jury heard Jake laughing about his clumsy sister, my parents calculating my worth, Morrison himself explaining how to make abuse look accidental. Why did you record these conversations? Mitchell asked her. At first, I thought Jake was joking. He had a dark sense of humor. But the more I heard, the more I realized he was serious. The night before the party, I heard him on the phone with someone, getting detailed instructions about angles and force. That's when I knew something terrible was going to happen. Why didn't you warn Vanessa? Brittany started crying. I was scared. Jake had hit me before, just once, but enough to know what he was capable of. I thought if I had evidence I could help afterward. I'm so sorry I didn't do more. Morrison tried to discredit her as a scorned girlfriend, but the recordings spoke for themselves. You could hear the premeditation, the cold calculation in every word. Day 3 brought a surprise witness. Jake's former cellmate from his brief stay in jail before making bail came forward. Jake had bragged to him about the scheme, thinking the man was impressed. Instead, the cellmate, a father of 3, had been horrified and immediately contacted prosecutors. He said his sister was like a renewable resource, the man testified. Hurt her enough to get paid, but not enough to kill the golden goose. He laughed about how she still tried to love them, how that made it easier. Dr. Chen testified about the brain injuries, showing the jury scan after scan of accumulated damage. This pattern of injury is consistent with systematic abuse over decades. The fact that Vanessa is able to function at all, let alone excel academically, is remarkable. The most shocking revelation came on day 4. Uncle Pete, my mother's brother, had been arrested and made a deal for a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony. He took the stand in shackles, his medical license already revoked. I provided medical consultation, he admitted. I told them which injuries would be worth the most, which would be hardest to prove as intentional, how to cause maximum damage with minimum evidence. How long had this been going on? Mitchell asked. Since Vanessa was 2. Her first injury, a broken leg that was an actual accident. But the insurance payout gave Linda and Robert an idea. They contacted me for advice on how to make it happen again. The jury looked horrified. My entire life had been orchestrated abuse. And the network Morrison ran? 63 families across the country, all hurting their children or disabled family members for insurance money. Morrison would connect families with medical consultants like me, help them set up the insurance policies, coach them through the injuries. He'd take 30% of every payout. On day 5, Morrison made a fatal error. He put my parents on the stand. My mother, trying to appear sympathetic, instead came across as cold and calculating. When shown the video of her discussing my worth, she actually said, "We gave her life. We had the right to decide how that life was used." The jury's disgust was palpable. My father was worse. He tried to claim I'd always been clumsy, but when Mitchell showed him the spreadsheet calculating my value, he reflexively said, "Those numbers are wrong." She was worth more at 23 because of the compound interest on the policies. He'd just admitted to the entire scheme while trying to correct the math. Jake took the stand against his lawyer's advice. His narcissism wouldn't let him stay quiet. Within minutes, he was ranting about how unfair it was that I got sympathy for my injuries while he got nothing for having to live with such a pathetic sister. "You pushed her off that deck intending to cause paralysis, didn't you?" Mitchell asked. "I pushed her intending to make money," Jake snapped. "The paralysis was just the method." Morrison tried to object, to claim his client wasn't understanding the question, but it was too late. The defense's case crumbled. Morrison's closing argument was desperate, trying to claim that even if injuries were intentional, They were motivated by financial desperation, not malice. But the jury had seen the vacations my parents took, Jake's expensive car, the comfortable life they'd lived off my pain. Mitchell's closing was powerful. Vanessa Anderson spent 24 years being tortured by the people who were supposed to love her most. They broke her bones, damaged her brain, and tried to break her spirit. But she survived. She's here, asking you not for sympathy but for justice, for recognition that what happened to her was real, was wrong, and must be punished. But more than that, she's asking you to send a message to the 62 other families out there doing the same thing. We see you, we will find you, and we will stop you. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. I stood, still using my cane but steady on my feet, as the jury foreman read the decisions. My mother, Linda, guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, child abuse, racketeering. Sentence, 25 years. My father, Robert, guilty on all counts, same charges, 20 years. Jake, guilty on all counts, attempted murder, assault, battery, fraud. Sentence, 15 years with mandatory psychiatric treatment. But the biggest victory came when they reached Morrison. The federal charges had been added to the state ones. Guilty on 43 counts of conspiracy, racketeering, fraud, and facilitating child abuse across state lines. Sentence, 30 years without parole. The courtroom erupted. Families of other victims who'd traveled to see the verdict hugged each other. Mrs. Patterson, sitting in the front row, openly wept with relief. Amy wrapped me in an embrace that said everything words couldn't. But the legal victories didn't stop there. The civil trial that followed awarded me everything. The judge ordered all insurance payouts my parents had received over the years to be returned to me with interest. Their house, cars, vacation property, everything was liquidated. Jake's inheritance from our grandparents, sitting in a trust fund, was transferred to me. The final settlement came to $3.2 million. Morrison's assets were seized under RICO laws. The 63 families in the network were all arrested. It became the largest insurance fraud bust in United States history. I used the money to establish the Survivors Shield Foundation. Our mission was simple: identify and prevent systematic family abuse disguised as accidents. We worked with hospitals to create screening programs, trained doctors to recognize patterns, and provided legal support for victims. Within the first year, we'd identified over 200 cases of suspected abuse. Our screening program was adopted by hospitals in 18 states. I hired other survivors, people who understood the signs because they'd lived them. Brittany was our first hire. Her courage in coming forward had saved my life, and she brought that same bravery to helping others. Dr. Chen joined our board of directors, lending medical expertise to our training programs. The physical recovery was its own journey. The doctors had been right. With intensive therapy, I regained full use of my legs. It took 18 months of daily work, but I went from wheelchair to walker, to cane, to walking unassisted. The day I ran my first mile, Amy paced beside me, both of us crying and laughing simultaneously. I completed my nursing boards, passing with the highest score in the state that year. The brain damage that should have destroyed my cognitive abilities had instead taught me to work harder, to create multiple pathways to remembering, to never take my mind for granted. I specialized in trauma nursing, working in the emergency department at Riverside General, the same hospital where the truth about my family had finally come to light. Dr. Martinez, who'd fought so hard to protect me that first night, became my mentor. My particular skill was recognizing abuse that others missed. I could spot the signs in how a child stood near their parent, in the too quick explanations for injuries, in the rehearsed quality of accident stories. I saved lives by seeing what others overlooked. 2 years after the verdict, love found me in the most unexpected way. Marcus had been my physical therapist during those grueling months of learning to walk again. He'd seen me at my absolute worst, crying through exercises, raging at my uncooperative muscles, celebrating tiny victories like wiggling a toe. I knew you were extraordinary the first day, he told me later. Not because of what you survived, but because of how you fought to reclaim your life. Our relationship developed slowly. Trust didn't come easily to someone who'd been betrayed by everyone who was supposed to love her. But Marcus was patient, consistent, and kind in ways that required no payment in pain. We married 3 years after the trial in a small ceremony in Mrs. Patterson's garden. She'd become the grandmother I'd never had, and walking me down the aisle was her honor, she said. Amy stood as my maid of honor. Detective Williams, who'd become a friend, attended along with the medical team who'd saved my life. The letter from Jake arrived the morning of my wedding. Amy wanted to throw it away unopened, but I needed to see it. Inside was a single line. You owe everything you are to us. I burned it in Mrs. Patterson's fire pit that night, watching the smoke disappear into the sky. Marcus held my hand as the last of my biological family's hold on me turned to ash. You owe them nothing, he said firmly. Everything you are comes from your own strength. 5 years after that terrible birthday party, I stood at the starting line of the Boston Marathon. My legs, the ones that had been paralyzed, that had relearned every movement through sheer determination, were about to carry me 26.2 miles. The crowd included my chosen family, Marcus and our 2 young children, Amy with her partner, Mrs. Patterson, in her wheelchair now but still fierce doctor, Martinez, Detective Williams, even Brittany with her own family. They held signs saying, Survivor, Fighter, Our Hero. As I ran, each step was a victory over everyone who tried to break me. Each mile was proof that they'd failed. My body, scarred and rebuilt, was mine now. It carried me forward into a life they'd never imagined I'd have because they'd never seen me as anything more than a resource to exploit. Crossing that finish line, I thought about the 8-year-old girl who'd nearly drowned while her parents watched. I thought about the 16-year-old with the broken arm, the 26-year-old paralyzed on the concrete. Each version of me had survived to make this moment possible. The local news covered the story. Local nurse completes marathon 5 years after family's murder attempt. The reporter asked me what message I had for other abuse survivors. Your family doesn't define your worth, I said, still catching my breath. The people who hurt you don't get to write your ending. Document everything. Trust your instincts, and never believe them when they say you're being dramatic. You're not crazy. You're not clumsy. You're surviving. And that takes incredible strength. The Survivors Shield Foundation's 5th anniversary gala was held 6 months later. The ballroom was filled with survivors, medical professionals, law enforcement, and supporters. We'd helped prosecute 212 cases, changed laws in 15 states, and saved countless lives. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. Some were scarred like me, visible and invisible wounds from people who should have protected them. Others were the helpers, the ones who'd learned to see the signs and act on them. Family, I began, my voice strong and clear, isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, respect, and protection. Real family doesn't require payment in pain. Real family doesn't calculate your worth in insurance payouts. Real family celebrates your victories without planning your defeats. I talked about the network of abuse we'd uncovered, how it had operated in plain sight because society couldn't believe parents would systematically hurt their children for money. I talked about the medical professionals who'd been complicit, the lawyers who'd facilitated it, the insurance companies that had paid out without questioning patterns. But mostly, I said, I want to talk about survival. Every person in this room who survived abuse, you did something extraordinary. You lived through calculated attempts to break you. You maintained your humanity despite being treated as less than human. You're here, and that's a victory. The foundation had grown beyond what I'd imagined. We had offices in 12 states, a staff of 50, and partnerships with major hospital systems. We'd created an AI system that could analyze medical records and flag potential abuse patterns. We'd lobbied for and passed Vanessa's law in 8 states, requiring hospitals to report suspicious patterns of family member injuries to a central database. As the gala ended, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 19, walking with a slight limp. "You saved my life," she said simply. "The screening program at my hospital caught what my parents were doing. 15 years of accidents that weren't accidents. I'm free because of you." Stories like hers made everything worth it. Every surgery, every therapy session, every night terror, every moment of pain had led to this, breaking the cycle, saving others, proving that survival was possible. 10 years have now passed since Jake pushed me off that deck. I run marathons regularly now. My body's stronger than it ever was before the injuries because I had to rebuild it from scratch. Marcus and I have 3 children who will never know a parent's love that comes with a price tag. They climb trees and ride bikes and sometimes fall, and when they do, we comfort them without calculating the value of their tears. My mother tried to contact me once before her parole hearing. She sent a letter through her lawyer claiming she'd found religion, that she was sorry, that she wanted to reconcile. I sent back a single word: no. My father died in prison 3 years ago. A heart attack. The irony not lost on anyone that his heart had failed him just as he'd failed me. I didn't attend the funeral. Jake remains in prison, his parole repeatedly denied, partly due to his complete lack of remorse, and partly due to the victim impact statements I provide for every hearing. Mrs. Patterson passed away last year at 93. She left me her house in her will, the one next door to my childhood home. I turned it into a transition house for abuse survivors, a place where people could stay while rebuilding their lives. Her garden still blooms every spring, tended by residents who find healing in nurturing something beautiful. The childhood home, where I'd been hurt so many times, was purchased by a young family. I watched from Mrs. Patterson's garden as their children played safely in the yard where I'd been pushed and burned and broken. It was redemption of a sort, seeing that house finally shelter love instead of calculated cruelty. Dr. Martinez and I published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine about recognizing patterns of systematic family abuse. It became required reading in many medical schools. The patterns I'd lived were now teaching future doctors to save lives. Detective Williams, now retired, volunteers with the foundation. She says my case changed how she saw domestic violence, made her realize that family abuse wasn't always about anger or control, but sometimes about cold, calculated profit. Amy remains my closest friend, my chosen sister. She was there for the worst moments and celebrates every triumph. When I told her I was pregnant with my first child, she cried harder than I did. "This baby will know only love," she said. "Real love." And she was right. My children know love without conditions, support without sabotage, safety without price tags. They trust that when they fall, we'll help them up, not calculate the value of their injuries. The foundation continues to grow. We've partnered with insurance companies to create algorithms that detect suspicious patterns of claims. We've worked with legislators to increase penalties for insurance fraud involving family members. We've created support groups, both online and in person, for survivors of systematic family abuse. But perhaps the most important work we do is validation. Every day we tell survivors, "You're not crazy. You're not dramatic. What happened to you was real, was wrong, and was not your fault. You deserved protection, not profit calculations." Looking back at that 26-year-old woman paralyzed on the concrete, being told she was dramatic while unable to feel her legs, I wish I could tell her, "You'll walk again. You'll run marathons. You'll find real love. You'll save lives. You'll turn your pain into purpose and your survival into strength." Most importantly, I'd tell her, "You'll build a family of choice who will love you, not for what they can take from you, but for who you are. You'll be valued not in insurance payments, but in immeasurable worth. You'll discover that the family you were born into was never your real family at all, just people who happened to share your DNA while planning your destruction." Asterisk. Asterisk. Life lesson asterisk asterisk. The people who are supposed to protect you might be the ones hurting you most. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even when everyone tells you you're overreacting or being dramatic. Document everything. Seek help from professionals trained to recognize abuse. You deserve safety, love, and respect without conditions or payment in pain. Blood doesn't make family. Love, respect, and protection do. Sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is walking away from those who share your DNA, but not your best interests. Your survival and thriving despite those who tried to break you is the ultimate victory. And remember, chosen family, the people who love you for who you are rather than what they can extract from you, that's real family. What would you do if you discovered your own family had been orchestrating your injuries for profit? How would you find the strength to not just survive, but to transform that pain into purpose? Share your thoughts below. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible and that real family is about love, not blood. Thank you for listening to my story. May you always recognize your worth and never let anyone, especially those who claim to love you, convince you otherwise. Remember, you're not being dramatic when you're being hurt. You're being hurt, and that's never okay, no matter who's doing it.